So what I'm going to talk about here, I'll be talking about IDSA, and specifically I'll be talking about an IDSA mobility data space, and even more specifically about a new community that is being created around this notion of IDSA mobility data space, and it is part of a bigger effort that is called IDSA Launching Coalition. You can see, oh my God, what are all those acronyms? I have no idea what the guy is actually talking about. Let me get started actually with the first one. What's the first acronym? IDSA. What does it stand for? Well, it stands for International Data Spaces Association. And what it is a marketing organization. And what it is marketing, what it is about, it is actually promoting international data spaces standards. So at the core of this is a standard which is called IDS. And the good news is indeed it became a standard this year in February. It became officially DIN 27070. It became a DIN standard this year, and IDSA is an association set up actually to promote adoption of this standard. And this notion of IDSA mobility data space is part of that particular effort actually to promote actually use of the IDS open standard in the mobility space. And this association already has actually about 110 members. It's growing rapidly, and it's not just a German affair. It's actually a pan-European venture, and not even pan-European, but there are also US-based companies involved in it, such as IBM and Google. And so what do I do here actually, right? So I'm a telecom, officer. I'm an executive and a business development officer, and I belong actually to the IoT data analytics organization within Deutsche Telekom. And specifically, I am involved in a product, and that product is called the Telecom Data Intelligence Hub. And you can go to a website. We have a product organization. And you can look it up yourself. It's dih.telecom.net, and you'll see something similar like this. And what is it? What the DIH is essentially 3 sets of services or components. Services, it's cloud-based platform as a service offering, but you can also buy components from us. Companies do this too. And in a nutshell, we distinguish between 3 different offerings. The one is that we currently offer an open data portal. You can go to the website of dih.telecom.net, and that's what you see. And the data is actually sourced from the European Open Data Portal, just to demonstrate actually that you can use our technology to set up an open data portal. Now, internally within companies, that is extremely useful as a data exchange, a data supermarket. Like, for example, my own background, I've been working a lot with customer data. I work particularly with the OEMs, with the big companies. There's customer data, valuable customer data is everywhere, right? It's in market research, it's in product development, it's in sales, it's in finance. The leasing people have it, but you can't easily grab it, right? Some of it is hidden, right? It's so complicated to get to the data. So companies would actually in the first benefit from setting up, an internal data exchange. Then the second type is we have a cloud-based analytics workspace. It's open source, so it's a Jupyter notebook that we enrich with a curated list of Python libraries and Git integration, so you can share analytics assets more easily, within an organization or in your extranet or your ecosystem of business partners. And the third one, and that's what I'm talking about today, is actually that we enable data sharing. Data sharing in a way actually that you can maintain the rights actually to data that you have that you would like to share. And that notion is referred to increasingly as data sovereignty. And my personal responsibility is in the mobility space. So if you go actually to the Data Intelligence Hub, we have a journal section. If you click on that journal section up here, you're going to end up, in an area where we talk about our use cases, examples, and stories. And there is one particular button that'll link to our smart mobility microsite. where we have a series on economics of data, mobility analytics, many more, examples how our technology actually has created user benefits. So that's to me personally my background is I've always been doing data analytics, even teaching and continue to do research, and I'm affiliated with a business school in the US. So what the heck? Why do we need actually mobility data space, right? What is the problem we are trying actually to solve, right? Is a solution looking for a problem? No, there is actually a real problem. And let me start out, briefly introducing that with a little story. And the story starts with a collision, right? And it'll end up with the mobility data space as a solution. Well, let me start out with the traditional automotive business. It's a very important industry for Europe, for Germany. It is essential for wealth creation in Europe, right? If I just look at jobs, the numbers are in the order of 13 to 14 million jobs are being created in that sector. And secondly, it's an engine that helps us actually move invention into innovation, making sure that progress is happening actually for every consumer, for ordinary citizens, right? Safety, or pick the latest, greatest, autonomous. It's not the entertainment, it's not the healthcare sector, it's the automotive sector that is driving actually progress in that space. And then finally, now actually with the new situation, the trade issues between, the superpowers, between the US, between China, it is also a source of power actually to the European Union. So in a nutshell, it's very, very important actually that we maintain actually, or even grow actually that particular strong industry. Well, what is the problem? The problem is actually, and I label it reality 2030, and some will argue it has already arrived, is there are a few issues here, right? And the most obvious is we're already full, right? The industry has worked beautifully, right? And improved the quality of the vehicles. And what is the consequence? Well, the one consequence is that cars last longer, right? And the entire model is built on selling more of it, right? And where are you going to put them? Particularly in urban areas, we don't know where to put cars anymore. We're full, actually. The second one, climate is an issue, right? We all know, elaborate on it, actually. We have air pollution, noise, accidents, so all bad consequences, and we got to address those. And then finally, we're even stuck in terms of value that generated for every single customer. So if I look at other areas that have been benefiting from digital, right, like entertainment, for example, orders of magnitude improvement as a consumer, right? In order to listen to music, right, or an entertainment show, in the old days, you had to be a king. You had to have your own orchestra, right, to listen to your own music, right? You had to have a theater group actually to listen to a play. Now we use actually Spotify, Netflix, all at our fingertips. With transportation, we're stuck actually, right? We're going backwards, right? It takes longer. We're stuck in traffic, but it's even getting more costly. Now, what is the solution? Well, the solution today is mobility, right? It's an umbrella, right? There's a lot happening under this notion of mobility, right? It can be electrified, it can be shared. We see progress in micromobility. We see shared e-bikes, e-scooters, and the reuse of existing assets for economic advantage, and that runs under those labels of multimodal and intermodal. So mobility is actually the solution, right? That is the path to growth for this industry. The problem? Mobility in itself is the very definition of a coordination problem, right? And I can slice it in three layers. I mean, there's technology, there's strategy, there's regulation, and we have compatibility issues, coordination problems at every level. Let me give you an example of technology. You all know, you've been in the US, right? You try actually to plug your razor into it. I mean, Thomas doesn't have the problem, right? Look at you. You don't shave anymore, but people who shave actually, how are you going to do this? The plug doesn't fit actually, right? And if it were to fit, the problem is not compatible with the electrical grid on the other side. So we have a lot of problems in mobility at all those different layers, right? And well, any good news there? Yeah, there is good news, and we already know the good news. One good news is actually reliance on open standards, right? It has solved problems in many different areas, right? And let me give some examples. On a computing layer, Linux operating system, the internet is one of the best examples how open standards enable the solution to coordination problems, actually, right? And now in this particular space, we're talking about Dada, Here it is, IDS. So IDS is an open standard, right, that could, in theory, help us reduce the coordination problems at a technology, maybe at a strategy layer to enable future, new, better mobility going forward. And this is where the mobility community fits in, the mobility data space community fits in. So we have IDSA as an organization to promote IDS as a standard, and it has been established formally as a DIN 2707 standard, and now it is about actually promoting this particular standard. And our mission is to promote this open standard IDS to make better mobility happen now. So that is the overall setting, actually, right? So starting out with the problem toward a solution. And now let me spend, the last minutes that I have, last 10 minutes, to drill a little bit into this, right? And explain more the technicalities with regard actually to IDSA.
Chris,
I've been talking, yeah.
You can for sure have like 5 more minutes. We just extended. That's no issue.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can fill that out. No.
Okay, that's what I thought. Perfect.
No problem there. No problem. Let me pick actually like multimodal, intermodal. What we're really talking about, we're talking about different organizational structures, right? In the old days, companies used to be more vertically integrated. Typically, when an industry get along, like Ford and automotive, had its own cow farms to produce the leather for the car seats, actually, as a controlled system. Today, no progress at all with this, right? We're very specialized, right? If you look at automaking today, the value add of automakers is down to probably 20%. I've seen with EVs, General Motors, I think the numbers that I've seen down to the bolt is like 11% or so, meaning that the rest is all procured and integrated and orchestrated. So the business system has become a lot more complicated with a lot more interfaces, right? And, in digital, we will have data streams. Data is flowing too. And with any business relationship, data has to be able to flow, has to follow, in essence, a particular business logic. And this is where it becomes very, very complicated, actually, right? And what I tried here is to illustrate actually different settings. If we were to create data pools, actually, right, you can distinguish between horizontal data pools and vertical data pools. Well, what it ultimately means is that different organizational entities have to make their data available and pool the data in some other repository. Well, whoever had siblings knows sharing is not an easy thing, right? You have to learn how to share, in a sense, right? And it's no different with data. That is a big complication. There are compelling use cases, right? Horizontally to share data, right? There are also compelling use cases to share data along actually a vertical industry system. There is value in it, and I love the talk, the previous talk from Autonomo, right? To literally enrich data by stacking data, creating so-called data sandwiches. So at the bottom, you start with where do people live, then you add to where do people move, right? You can add weather information in it, right? You can enrich it. The problem, though, is that you typically talk about data from different sources and the different rights attached to the data. Well, how do we solve this? How do we deal with that, essentially? And that is being addressed actually by those IDS standards. Now it gets a little more complicated, or the diagrams can easily get more complicated. But in a nutshell, it's actually very, very simple. Well, the key problem actually that we have to establish, or 2 key problems that have to address is, number one, and that's no different in any other business transaction, is trust, right? We got to establish trust, right? And so you can ask yourself, well, how do we do this today, right? How is this being done? Well, we do it today with contracts, right? We use contracts, and contracts actually, they sit on top of an established legal infrastructure, right? So now with data too, why don't we follow that same logic in essence, right? There got to be a way actually to reuse as much existing infrastructure as possible. So why don't we reuse as much as trust creating infrastructure that allows that? So let's use actually existing contracts. Let's use the whole legal system that has been built around maintaining and enforcing contractual agreements. That's what we want to do. And then the The second requirement is, and that's a key requirement, that explains, why, Unix computing, then the internet and all of that became so popular, and that is the scalability of it. Or looking at another way is to reduce the transaction cost to near zero, right? That is what is the engine in digital, really, right? That allows us actually to dramatically reduce actually the cost actually to coordinate activities, whether they're going to be horizontal or whether they're going to be vertical, actually, right? And so that's what the IDS standard, right, or the entire setting for the IDS standards can actually accomplish, right? It does, number one, it'll establish trust, and number two, it provides a setting that is scalable to reduce the cost of transactions. One can ask, well, that is all good talk. Now, how is actually that being done? Well, at the core is the notion of a connector. A connector, and you can see this little diagram down here is actually not, it's a piece of software in essence. It's a piece of software that allows me to exchange data with another party. And what is required with the other party is another piece of software, is a corresponding connector. And of course, we have to build an environment around it that ensures actually that that connector can be clearly identified as, if in this setting is set up as a data provider, consumer, as the consuming connector side to it. But again, that is no big complication. It is, in essence, what we do is we move a very typical transaction into a digital space, right? You want to buy a house, right? You want to make sure actually that whoever receives the money is the party that is actually been giving you the rights to the house, actually. So we have to make sure that those mechanisms actually here can be implemented as well. And this is what the IDS technology will ultimately do. Now, where we are at is at a state where the theory actually now has to be converted into a real-world application. And this is where a company, you've always been probably asking yourself, IDS, that is an organization. This guy, Langdon, is from Telecom. What is Telecom actually doing in all of this? The IDS standards have been created in the scientific community. It all started out with the German government making money available to a consortium of Fraunhofer institutes, a dozen or so Fraunhofer institutes, many, many years ago. And it took actually many, many years actually to finally arrive at a reference architecture model, which became a standard this year. And it is now all being consolidated under IDS and under a specific Fraunhofer Institute. It's the ISST located in Dortmund that continues to be the scientific brain behind it. But science can only move so far, right? So what is actually required is businesses have to come in and they have to implement components and ideally the entire IDS setting. And that is what's happening as we speak. And the government continues actually to be helpful in facilitating that. And there are currently, different efforts where that is happening. And the one effort, and let me actually focus on that a little more, is something that is labeled as Gaia X. And I don't know whether you've heard about that. Just 3 weeks ago, Mr. Altmaier actually teamed up with his French counterpart, Lemaire, and they announced actually the kickoff of something they call Gaia X. And Gaia X is actually putting in place a data sharing pooling infrastructure to ensure that even small players in Europe actually can take advantage of a future where some AI actually will need great data pools. And that has just started 3 weeks ago. Now, this needs business partners, needs companies actually to implement certain components and make them available to others. And we are involved actually in that particular one.